Welcome into Quick Slants, presented by Nissan, alongside Ray Didinger. I'm Marc Farzetta, and I'm happy to announce that we're both healthy, at least on this Monday. Unfortunately, same can't be said for those Eagles. But the calf okay? Ray, everything's fine?
Everything's fine.
You feel great? You look great. Well, I'll tell you what, the Eagles had 4 players go down with injuries last night in Atlanta in the Sunday night contest. Dallas Goedert didn't even make it through the pre-game warm-ups. Defensive tackle may be the biggest cause for concern. Our own John Clark confirms that Tim Jernigan broke a bone in his foot. That injury comes on the heels, no pun intended, of Malik Jackson, his season-ending surgery. The good news, though, is that Jernigan will not require surgery and is only expected to miss about a month. But Ray, right there, you see all those names. Right there, which one of those injuries is the one that concerns you the most?
Jernigan, because all of a sudden, a position that you thought was an area of real strength on this team coming into the season, defensive tackle, because you had Fletcher Cox, you got Tim Jernigan, you signed Malik Jackson, you figure you've got a great 3-tackle rotation, you got Hassan Ridgeway there in case you need a 4th, and now 2 games in, you're down 2 players. And I honestly thought when I heard the report that Jernigan was leaving the building last night in a walking boot, my fear was you were going to find out today that he was lost for the season. So it's almost, you almost feel relieved that he might be back for the second half of the year. But if you ask me, and that's a long injury list, but if you ask me my greatest area of concern right now, it is a defensive tackle, because right now you've got Fletcher Cox, you've got Hassan Ridgeway, and a lot of question marks.
Well, Akeem Spence just joined the team, literally signed his contract on Wednesday. Next thing you know, he's actually playing in this game. So this seems right now to be Fletcher Cox's show. And they alluded last night on the broadcast that he still might be dealing with that toe injury from last year. And now you got Akeem Spence, you have Hassan Ridgeway. So really, when you look at the defensive tackle position, do you see the Eagles going out there and trying to make another addition?
Might have to. The other option is playing Curry or Graham inside for a lot of snaps. And you get the feeling when Jim Schwartz and Doug Peterson talk about it, it's not something they want to do. They'll do it on occasion, they'll do it situationally, but they don't want to move those guys down there and have them playing too many snaps. So, yeah, it would not surprise me if they went outside and looked for another tackle. The only problem is if you go out and you bring somebody else in, somebody else has to come off the roster. It's going to require another roster move. So the Eagles are having to make an awful lot of personnel shuffling just 2 weeks into the season.
I know that Chris Long's name has been brought up a couple of times as the guy to come in as a defensive end. Another name that's been brought up in really before the season was Connor Barwin, former Eagle, who is also making a bit of a campaign to try to come back to the Birds. If they decide to move somebody like that inside, would they then maybe go out to get somebody that would be a little bit more familiar with Philadelphia, like Long or Barwin?
Well, right now, your problem is interior. It's not on the edges. If you had lost an end or 2 ends, I think you'd be immediately speed dialing those guys. But right now, I mean, you need a big body inside. And I was having the same feeling about Fletcher Cox. I've watched him now for 2 games, and he's not playing like Fletcher Cox. I mean, he's not dominating inside the way we normally would. Every game that he always makes 3-4 plays that are impact plays, tackles on the line of scrimmage, or forcing the quarterback to throw an incomplete pass, or there's always a handful of plays where he's a dominant force. Haven't had that yet. He's making some plays, but they're not Fletcher Cox kinds of plays. So if you have him at less than 100%, and now you're down the other 2 guys, yeah, you're very thin at tackle.
We knew almost immediately in the game last night that injuries were going to be a concern, as we heard about Dallas Goedert, we heard about Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson. The other thing early on in the game that was cause for concern was the play of quarterback Carson Wentz, who struggled mightily in the first half without Deshaun, without Alshon, and without Dallas Goedert. But, man, did he turn it on in the 4th quarter, Ray? Wentz was able to take control. 13 of 18 for 135 yards in the final quarter of play. Also converted a 4th and 14. These numbers right here would look even better if Nelson Agholor didn't drop that likely touchdown game winner, possibly, depending on how much time's on the clock. That was also down the sideline to Nelson Agholor. But then the other one to Zach Ertz, if he's able to get 1 more yard on that 4th and 8. Both guys, Nelson Agholor and Zach Ertz, owned up to their mistakes post-game.
No matter what it was, I think for me, I made some mistakes that could have put us in position to win it, to be honest. And, it's tough, but, we'll watch the tape. I know I will, and I want to learn a lot from this tape because I hate this feeling.
Really disappointed in myself. Obviously, the team counts on me to make the play on 4th down. Made it plenty of times, just came up a little short. I'm an emotional player. And I feel like I kind of let the team down at the end. I tried my best, and we're so close. And it's gonna hurt for a while, but I'll be better.
Ray, if either of those plays get made either by Ertz or by Aguilar, we're most likely talking about an Eagles win today. But let's go back to Wentz for a second here. Wentz's performance, what did you make of it last night, really without 3 of his top 5 catching targets?
Yeah, that and the fact he had very little running game. You know, I mean, he was in a really tough spot here. He loses several of his big playmakers very early in the game. And then your normal impulse would be to say, well, okay, we're down all these playmakers in the passing game, let's just run the ball. And they tried to run the ball without success, to me, which is one of the most disappointing aspects of this. I mean, this Atlanta defense just got run into the ground by Minnesota a week ago. So you would have thought on a night of, okay, if we really got to lean on our running game, we can do it. They couldn't do it. I mean, they were averaging just barely 3 yards a carry and couldn't sustain anything. So now it all falls on Carson Wentz. And I thought in the second half, I thought he really played well. I think this, at the end of the game, his quarterback efficiency rating is 61.1. But to me, this is one of those games where the numbers don't begin to tell you how well he played. I mean, he played much, much better than that because he didn't have the running game to lean on. He was down all of his leading receivers. He's throwing to guys that he hasn't had all that many reps with. And I thought the way he rallied the team in the second half, drove the team down the field in the fourth quarter, on a night when he was taking a terrible beating in that game. I mean, he was sacked 3 times, but he could have easily been sacked 7 because there were several sacks that he ran out of and broke away from. Converted all those third downs on that drive, some big passes in that. And I just thought that I thought it was kind of a growth game for him in a lot of ways. Again, he'll have better games statistically, but in terms of on a night when nothing was going right for him, I mean, he just led this team back and put them in a position with 3 minutes to go where they were actually leading with a chance to win this game. And it was really all about his play. So I know there are people out there that are probably going to be critical of him. They're going to look at the numbers and say they're ordinary. But I think if you watched this game, you saw that this was a young quarterback that was growing up in a big way.
Yeah, in the early goings of the game, though, I mean, you mentioned the passer rating, the efficiency rating for the quarterback. Carson Wentz, a 101 passer rating in the second half of the game, but in the first half, just 6. And this has become more of a trend with Carson, where it seems like they sputter out of the gate. What do you attribute that to?
I wish I knew. You know, I mean, last week when they played Washington, it was easy to just say, oh, they were rusty because they didn't play enough in the preseason. Well, you can't say that now. You can't say, wow, they were great in the second half against Washington and now they were rusty in Atlanta. No, that doesn't wash. So obviously this is a continuation of the pattern that we saw last year when they were a real slow starting team, real slow in the first quarter and slow again in the second quarter, which was totally different than what they were in 2017. You know, I know that Doug Peterson comes from the West Coast school of offense where you script your plays and so forth. You know, maybe he needs to bring in a script doctor on this one to work on it, to work on his first 15 or 20 plays because it just isn't clicking for them. I mean, now through two games, they've had 15 plays they've had 3 possessions in the first quarter. 15 plays. They're only averaging 3.1 yards per snap in that period. Obviously, something is going wrong there. Maybe the secret is to just come out and run no huddle, run tempo right from the beginning, just to try and get something going. But right now, what they're doing it's very inefficient.
All right, moving on now. The quarterback, as we just talked about, not the only one making adjustments on the fly last night. Doug Peterson didn't find out until after warm-ups that he wouldn't have Dallas Goedert, and then lost both DeSean Jackson as well as Alshon Jeffrey early in the first quarter. Doug Peterson talked today about the challenges those injuries posed to his own momentum.
If you were to look at my call sheet this morning, you're going to see a lot of scratch outs on plays and different things. And, you know, one thing that I said after the game too is, with Mike Rowe, Jeff Stoutland, my offensive staff making the adjustments that we needed to make and then coaching those young guys up, Mac Hollins, JJ. And what's interesting, if you watch the game as we did this morning, I mean, Zach is telling guys where to go. Nelly's telling we're moving guys. Our pieces are moving, and we're putting guys in positions that didn't practice in those positions during the week, and still had a chance at the end of the game. Took the lead and had a chance. So my hats off to those guys for hanging in there.
Ray, the first half was pretty rough to watch if you were a Birds fan. Only 95 total yards from the Eagles' offense. But then they put up nearly 200 points in the second half on a night they really couldn't even run the football, as you alluded to earlier. So what do you think of the job that Peterson actually did last night on the fly?
Well, I actually think when I look at this from a coaching standpoint, I look at it in two ways. I look at Peterson and I look at Schwartz. And Peterson, I think that he adjusted in the second half and they came up with some better things. And again, I think it's an awful credit to Carson Wentz for the way that he played. But I was most concerned about the offensive line. You didn't have any injuries on the offensive line, and yet the offensive line underperformed really badly. I mean, if you lose receivers, you lose receivers. But you didn't lose any of your offensive linemen. And against an opponent that I really thought they were going to come out and dominate, they did not. And that, to me, was very disappointing. On the other side of it, to me, this was a real different Jim Schwartz. I mean, this was the most blitzing that I had seen him do. I mean, there are a lot of people, including Seth Joyner, that have been questioning the play calling and saying they should blitz more. And in this game, boy, I haven't gone back and broken it down, but the blitz ratio, I'll bet, was somewhere between 40 and 50%, which is really unusual for him. And it was effective. I mean, they got to Matt Ryan. I mean, they got a couple big sacks on it. They forced him into 3 interceptions. They were, again, really good in the red zone. Now, I don't know if this is something that was specific to the Falcons or this is some sort of a philosophical change that we're going to move forward with, but I just thought there was such a big difference in the way Schwartz called the game that it made me wonder what actually was at work there, and will we actually see more of that next week and the week after?
Well, I know we saw Jim Schwartz blitz Matt Ryan going back to the NFC Championship game in 2017, 2018, the year here at Lincoln Financial Field, where he dialed that little Rodney McLeod safety blitz going down to take down Matt Ryan. I guess he was a little encouraged by that right there. Now, moving on, talking about some more of that offensive line that you mentioned, we couldn't contain the Falcons' pass rush as you expected, Ray, as I expected as well. Carson Wentz paying the price for that. Should we be worried about the offensive line going forward? We're back with a look at the NFC's 2-0 crowd. 5 teams have started with 2 wins so far, including the Dallas Cowboys, who get to face the Dolphins at home in Week 3. The 49ers have actually put up the best point differential so far of the 2-0 group with a plus 38 through 2 games. Right now, the Cowboys, they had a tough test yet, have they? No, not even a little bit. But they've also put up 66 points in 2 games under their new offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, who was in the league just about 3 years ago. So right now, you look at Dallas, and they look pretty impressive. You think the Eagles might need to win 11, maybe even 12 games to take home the championship in the NFC East against those Cowboys?
I don't think you're going to get there with 10. I think you're going to need more than that. And, yeah, I think that's... The Cowboys have got Miami this week, so they can pretty much name the score on that one. So they're going to be 3-0. And I think that the change in offensive coordinator has really made a difference with the Cowboys. Scott Lanahan, who had been the offensive coordinator before, to me was very predictable in his play calling, in his structure, in his pass routes. Everything about him, you could almost kind of look at the down and distance and just call a play for him. I mean, it's just... And Kellen Moore has come in, and when you watch the Cowboys now, there's just a lot more motion. There are a lot different formations. There's just a lot more, for the lack of a better term, there's a lot more nuance to their offense right now. And it seems to really be suiting this personnel, and it's certainly suiting Dak Prescott. I mean, he's off to a great start. But I think this was a change that they kind of needed to make. They had really fallen into a rut, I thought, offensively under Lanahan. But I think Kellen Moore, who's come in, he was just the backup quarterback there just a couple of years ago. But they've turned the playbook over to him, and I think he's doing a really good job calling plays.
Yeah, going to Dallas over from Detroit. We'll have more quick slants for you in just 90 seconds. 10 times Falcons defensive line spent way too much time in the backfield, Ray. There were also 4 accepted holding penalties, 3 of which by Isaac Seumalo. Have you lost confidence in any of the offensive line members after last night's loss, Ray?
I wouldn't say I've lost confidence in the line. They played poorly across the board, and Seumalo most of all. Is there some concern about him? Yeah, I thought he was coming on. He was playing better last year. Played pretty good against Washington, but this game to me was a huge step back. Now, you have to factor in the fact that he was matched up against Grady Jarrett, who's, I think, one of the best defensive tackles in football. And so even going in, I had a feeling this is going to be a tough matchup, and it was. And Seumalo had a really bad night. He's going to have to play better. And the fact is, you know, if people say, well, make a change, well, to who? You know, you don't have that many options. I mean, Wisniewski would have been if he were still here, but he's not. You know, Matt Pryor hasn't played that much football. You can't go there. So I don't know that it's as simple as take him out and put somebody else in right now. You just have to get him playing better.
Now, I know some of the talk came up that Vitae might go from right guard, a position that he just learned, to possibly moving to left guard in an emergency situation. Is that something you would foresee?
No, I think they'll give Sayamalu a chance to work through this because Vitae is still learning the one guard position, and I don't know that throwing him in on the left side would necessarily improve things. I have a lot of confidence in Jeff Stoutland. I think he's a really good offensive line coach, and they've got some issues right now, but I think he can work them through it. I think it's Sayamalu's job, and listen, it's not easy, but he's playing between two really good players. He's got Peters on one side of him, he's got Jason Kelsey on the other. He's playing between two Pro Bowl players. So I have a feeling that the combination of that and the coaching of Jeff Stoutland will get him through this.
We talked about some QB struggles early on. We talked about the injuries. We talked about the offensive line. How about that secondary? Falcons clearly targeting cornerback Ronald Darby a lot in this game. Calvin Ridley beat Darby for the game's first touchdown, a 34-yard score in the second quarter. Then, Ray, this guy only 10 months removed, though, Ronald Darby, from ACL surgery. Do you think Jim Schwartz might be putting too much on Darby's plate early?
I don't know. I've been wondering about that. He didn't do much during the summer. He didn't do much during the preseason. He was one of those guys like Fletcher Cox that was just sort of off to the side doing their own program. And we were told every day, don't worry about them. They'll be ready when the season starts. Well, they might be ready to line up, but are they going to be really ready to play? And I think you're seeing that a little bit with Fletcher Cox. You're seeing it more so with Darby. They have a lot of bodies in the secondary, but you get the feeling that they're trying to figure out exactly how they all fit, where all the pieces fit together. Is Rasul Douglas, is he really a corner or should he be a safety? Avante Maddox, should he be playing the slot or should he be playing outside? You're pretty well locked in on Darby. He's an outside corner, but right now the way he's playing, he's not helping you out there. And what I thought was most disturbing last night was when you watched the game, every time the Falcons needed a play, Matt Ryan was throwing it right at Ronald Darby. I mean, he clearly had the big bullseye on him, and he's a better player than that. So I think he's still working his way back from the injury.
Yeah, Ronald Darby even told our own Derek Dunn after the game, he was a little surprised by how much they actually did target him for this game. Now coming up next, 2 star quarterbacks went down in the NFL on Sunday, and that's going to impact the betting lines moving forward. Our betting expert, Brad Feinberg, explains those numbers coming up in a few, and how can you benefit when Quick Slants returns. We welcome in our betting expert, Brad Feinberg. Brad, welcome in. Thanks for joining us per usual. And how about those Cleveland Browns? You bet on them in the offseason because they were offseason champions after acquiring Odell Beckham Jr., but they were embarrassed by the Tennessee Titans in Week 1. Tonight, they're a 6.5-point road favorite this time around in North Jersey to take on the Jets. What do you make of those numbers there, Brad?
Yeah, Mark, I do think it's slightly too many points. And listen, this game is a lean for me. I lean New York Jets. Cleveland, we saw a team that a lot of people were bullish on, me included, but the people that were nervous about them was what's going to happen with their coach, Freddie Kitchens. Are they going to be too immature? 18 penalties first game. We saw mistake after mistake after mistake. But we're going against a New York team that's losing Sam Darnold, losing Quentin Williams, and losing linebacker C.J. Mosley. I would argue they're 3 of their 5 most important players. I still think Trevor Siemian is a decent enough backup. I think he's a serviceable player, where I think 6.5 points is slightly too many guys. But this is not a game I am betting. I think there's other games that are more value than this game. This is the game I am passing on, Mark.
All right. Hey, Brad, there are 2 major quarterback injuries we saw yesterday.
Yes.
Ben Roethlisberger has an elbow injury. It now takes him out for the year. And Drew Brees has a thumb injury. It's probably going to take him out for maybe 6 weeks. How do you think that's going to impact, let's say, their Super Bowl odds?
Ray, it's a great question. What we have is huge moves, Ray. Huge, especially with Pittsburgh. We saw them at 20-1, Ray, to win the Super Bowl before this game. Now they're up to 100-1. No one is going to be betting them. Is there value in that? Listen, I will say this. Mason Rudolph actually played a pretty good game, but would I be betting Pittsburgh at 100-1 odds right now? No, I just don't have it in me. And we see New Orleans teams that was 8-1, one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl, now down to 25-1, losing Brees for, let's say, 6 weeks, may even be longer if they put him on IR. Again, the Saints were a team I was not excited about before the year at 8-1. 25-1, I get how it's a little more value, but I don't trust Teddy Bridgewater enough to be that kind of quarterback. I actually think he's a little bit overrated. People see him as one of the best guys who's not a starter. Maybe I'll say that, but I don't think he's one of the best starting players in the NFL at all. So I think it's a big downgrade for the Saints.
So, Brad, when you look at these 2 teams, you look at the Saints, you look at the Steelers, I mean, could they be good plays for the public right now, value-wise, because they could be going against those backup quarterbacks?
You know, Mark, what I would say is, out of the two games, I would look more for Pittsburgh, because actually Mason Rudolph played a really good game last week, Mark. There was really not much of a drop-off. Again, small sample size. But I would say out of the two guys, I'm more excited about his prospects, because I think the line is more biased against him and pro-Bridgewater. And I think Bridgewater may be actually a tad overrated in terms of the point spread right now.
All right, Brad, thanks so much for joining us per usual. For Ray Didinger, this has been Quick Slants presented by Nissan. Brad, Ray, I'm Mark. Thanks for joining us as we filled in for, of course, Barrett Brooks and Derek Gunn. Have a good night, everybody.
This is Philadelphia. It's pretty big.